Hi, I'm Chris, and today we're reviewing the new Gavin Dance album, Afterburner. Gavin Dance is, of course, an American post-hardcore band, but I think a large part of their appeal is that their sound is so niche-specific, and seeing as it's a niche that they largely carved out for themselves, it's very easy to understand why they have such a strong cult following. And so, with that said, I want to preface this review by saying that I don't think that this latest offering is going to be much of a disappointment to hardcore fans. The sound on this album is very much like a slightly groovier and less grandiose version of the sound on their previous album, and as a result, there isn't much here that's going to alienate anyone who is really invested in this band. However, my personal opinion as a fan myself is that so many of these songs leave me with mixed feelings that I also have a hard time believing that this is going to be a standout in their discography. As a general rule, the best moments on this album tend to be those that are just a bit more laid back. Specifically, songs like Calentamiento Global and Three Wishes are heavily dictated by the incredibly groovy bass and percussion. And when the rest of the band just sort of rides that groove with some solid vocal melodies and rippling guitar licks, the record strikes me positively, just immersing me into a mostly cool, relaxing experience. But despite the fact that I'm usually a fan of contrast in music, when Will Swan explodes with his incredibly sharp, sour guitar tone and the percussion becomes more intense, I find that that somehow breaks the immersion and the record leaves me feeling very little at all. However, in fairness, I should say that one strong element of the more intense sections is John Mess's screams and shouts, which sound just a bit more petulant and unhinged than they usually do, despite the fact that he always sounds petulant and unhinged. And as a result, when all of the elements really align, there are a few moments on this record that feel particularly vicious and are effective at bringing me back into the experience. A good example of this comes later in the record with the track Say Hi, on which John Mess's screams are particularly vicious and mix with the vacillating, malevolent guitar in a way that makes you feel like there's some imminent danger all around you. However, that's not a full endorsement of Say Hi, because that song is also an example of a problem that sweeps the entire back half of this album, which is that the vocal melodies do fall off after a certain point and become less engaging. The first 7 tracks on the record generally have very good vocal melodies, with Tilian really riding the groove and using more of the low end of his vocal range that creates an incredibly relaxing, sultry atmosphere. But when you get into the back half on tracks like Nothing Shameful, the vocal melodies that he chooses tend to become a little bit bouncier or otherwise feel like they were just a little bit more lazily written. And as a result, they just don't grab me like the first 7 tracks worth of vocal melodies do. Tilian's vocal performance, however, is incredibly solid across the entire record, with him using more of his full vocal range than I'm accustomed to hearing, and delivering every note with a silky smooth vocal timbre that is a very nice compliment to John Mess. The features on this album are also well utilized. Johnny Frank of Bill Murray pops up in the final track, Into the Sunset, in which his voice is laid over a doo-wop groove that is mixed with some artificial hi-hats. And I think that his rounder, less idiosyncratic voice matches that combination much better than Tilian's vocals would have. Andrew Wells of the criminally underrated Idola also pops up on the track Nothing Shameful, and his verse is sincerely one of the best portions of the entire album, making me feel more than anything else in the back half and calling back to the track Evaporate from the previous album. Returning to Will Swan's guitar, it's really a mixed bag. When his guitar licks are cleaner and a bit more measured, they really serve to make any given section pop very effectively, adding a lot of flavor to the always solid grooves and the dueling vocals. But when he's attacking the guitar a bit more quickly and frantically, it really becomes very hit or miss. Sometimes those more aggressive licks really make a section explode or soar, but more often than not, they sound to me like guitar warm ups that happen to be in the key of the song. For example, the bursts of electric guitar that come at the beginning of the opening track, Prisoner, fail to really make me feel anything at all, irrespective of the fact that that song then goes on to have one of the most emotionally potent choruses on the entire album, guitar work included. Switching gears, the mix on this album is very good. As I said earlier, some of the best moments are when the bass and percussion have their hands on the wheel, and their very full presence in the mix is very well balanced with the guitars and the vocals. And I've covered it independently in a video aside from this album review, but I want to call special attention to track 7, Strawberry's Wake, because I really do think that it is the best track on the album and a very welcome addition to their catalog, taking all the best elements of this record and condensing them into a single song. I would also like to point out that there isn't a single track on this album that is completely devoid of spectacular moments. On any given song, you're likely to find an excellent transition either in or out of a chorus, a catchy chorus itself, some killer guitar leads, catchy vocal melodies. All of these things are present on the album. The problem, in my opinion, is just that they're very seldom brought together into a single unit. Altogether, this is a decent entry into Gavin Dance's catalog, but it does feel like a step down from their last album, and it very often fails to make me feel very much at all. I'm giving this album a 5.5 out of 10, and with that, see ya.